Hi, I'm Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make a double oven mitt. Now, what's a double oven mitt is what I asked when I was shown how to make this. You know, if you're taking something out of the oven, cookies, a casserole, you're usually scrambling to find some oven mitts and maybe you find one but not the other. This solves that problem of having them attached. So as you can imagine, now if you pull it towards yourself, let's say that that's something that has, you know, it has like some hot cheese or something that could spill on you or burn you. This kind of protects your clothes and yourself. So there's a lot of good reasons to make something like this. And you can personalize it with a monogram with your family's last name, the first initial, and it looks cute hanging right over the stove handle. So let me show you how quick and easy this is to make. And economical. It takes almost no fabric. Now, we used a product called Brit. This information will be available on the home page. On the very bottom, there's a link that says free downloads. Click on that. You're looking for the double oven mitt. When you go there, you'll also print off a template, and that's going to be the curved shape that we used here. So you'll want to print that out, and then any specific dimensions that you need to cut things to will also be listed there. So don't worry about writing any of that down today. What Brit is it insulates you from the heat. So we'll be using a layer of Brit today that's readily available at Joann's, Hancock's, or maybe your local even quilt store might have that batting and 2 pieces of fabric. We were able to make the double oven mitt with a ½ yard of fabric for the main part, and then for the bias binding and the little handle parts, those each take a fat quarter. So that's pretty economical, a yard of fabric in total, to make something that would also make a great housewarming gift. So you'll get 2 pieces of fabric, one for the front and one for the back. We just chose the same fabric, but you could choose something different if you wanted to. And a layer of the batting and a layer of the Brit. Now, we went ahead and opted to quilt ours because that is a lot of area to span without those layers being put together and sewn together and secured with some stitching. Now, I want to point out that Brit does have a right and a wrong side. Do you notice the shiny side? That's the side that you definitely want to have up. So when you're layering this initially, make sure you don't turn that shiny side down. You want to have that up. And that's the part that will be closest to the heat of the oven, and the batting on this side will be closest to you. So that way it reflects the heat away from you, and that makes sense. So let's layer this all together. Now what we did, we cut this bigger initially, quilted it, and then cut it down. So if it's not layering exactly as desired, don't worry, we're going to trim that down to be a little bit smaller later on. So you'll lay this out, and to quilt it, we just grabbed our friction pen. Love the friction pen because any lines that you draw in there will be able to be eliminated with heat. So just start off with, you can use your 45-degree ruler, or you can quilt it any way you want to. You might want to do stippling, or you might have a specific design. We just went in and started drawing some lines about 2 inches apart all the way down, and then just came back the other direction. And you can play with the angle, and that'll give you different designs. So go ahead and quilt it as you prefer. Then what you'll do, I'll put that aside. We've quilted this ahead of time and trimmed it down. Again, those measurements that we trimmed everything down to are on the website, so you don't need to worry about what those measurements are. So we've got this ready to go, and then this is when you're going to use your template. So rather than use the template right now, I'm going to actually show you how to make the little pockets, and I'm actually going to use the template on those first, and then I'm going to show you an option. Let me show you exactly what I mean. The pockets similarly have a front and a back. There's no Brit on the pockets, but instead there's just a batting. So you'll get a front and a back for each pocket and 1 piece of batting. Now, if you want to do the cute monogram, which is always fun to add those cute little touches, and we have so many different shabby shapes. So you might want to do ones that are themed for different holidays. So you could have an oven mitt for, you know, a specific Valentine's or maybe Christmas. We have all kinds of shabby shapes. So don't think that there's just letters. There's so much to choose from. you'll go ahead and layer this with one piece of fabric, your batting, and then the other piece. And then what we recommend that you do, if you're going to use a shabby shape, is put it on here and then stitch that down. It gives it a quilted look. I don't know if you can see that here. That's exactly what we did. We layered these together, then put the letter on and stitched it down. So it just made it a little bit poofy. It looks like it's almost embossed. Once that's put together, and if you've chosen to use a shape like this, you've stitched it down, that's when you're going to use your template. So let's bring that over. Let's put that aside for the moment. And you'll just, let's pretend like that was already, ironed down. At that point, you'll just put your template on here, trace around it, and cut it out. That's what we have. Actually, we have this one right here. Let me point out something to you, because I almost did this wrong, thinking that I wanted to put the letter on this way and cut my template out this way. So keep in mind that the scoop is going to be displayed in the front of the oven. So make sure you don't put your letter or shape on upside down, because I almost did that when we were working on this project. So just make sure that the letter or shape, the scoop is on the bottom, and that the shape is upright. So just something, again, to try to, wouldn't that be a bummer if you iron that on wrong and now you have to start all over again? So we've used our template, we've cut that out for both sides. Now, this is where the option comes in. You can either, of course, this is going to be laying right along here. You can either just lay this down here and with your friction pen, trace right here, or you could use your template. It doesn't matter. I mean, this shape was from this template, so it doesn't matter whether you do this or whether you do this, but that's going to be your next step to go ahead and create the curvature. So let's go ahead and actually do that here. And I'll just use this, and we're going to go ahead and draw on there. And you would just go ahead and cut that out with some scissors or a rotary cutter as you prefer. And repeat for the other end, of course, so that they will be the same. Now notice how the little pocket has some trim. It has some binding on it. So from your fat quarter or whatever fabric you'll be using for your binding that will be going across the top of the pockets and around the entire oven mitt, you do want to use a bias cut. And if you're not familiar what that is, binding strips are historically cut across the width of the fabric or maybe down the length of the fabric. But with bias, they're cut on 45-degree angle because any fabric cut on the 45 has more stretch. And you need that to be able to go around these curves. So just keep that in mind rather than doing your binding strips up the width of the fabric or down the length. You want to be going across the bias. And we've done that ahead of time. And we've went ahead and spliced our binding. But for the little pockets, all you'll need to do is just grab a little bit of that binding. You've got your wrong sides together here. We've cut our strips to 2.5 inches. And you're simply going to sew this 1/4 inch. And then pivot this around to the back. And you can go ahead and sew that down by machine. That you got to remember, this part of the pocket is hidden. You could sew that down by hand if you're used to binding quilts by hand, but we found just to save a little bit of time, we went ahead and machine stitched ours. Once you have both of those ready to go and the bindings around the ends here, and these are already cut out. In fact, let me get you to that place and then I'm going to show you how to finish up this project. Now that the double oven mitt is layered and ready to go, I've got the 2 pockets. I've got the binding strips on each of those. You'll just want to make sure, of course, that everything's stacked exactly where you want it to be. And now we'll bring in the binding. We cut the 2.5 inch strips on the bias and join them as you typically would. I'll show you a quick join so you know what those look like on the back side there. Now you'll want to start, I would start somewhere in this section and leave a pretty good flap. Now you've got your opening here and your fold here. It's the opening that's going to be going against the oven mitt, and we're just going to pin, and I'm going to leave a big, nice big opening here. You'll see why we're going to be leaving that opening. And you'll just keep pinning. Now this is a lot of bulk down in this area, so whenever I get into an area that has a lot of bulk, I just pin and pin and pin some more. And if it's really bugging you, or if it's slipping around, you could even consider doing maybe an 1/8 of an inch basting stitch just to hold this section together while you are sewing the binding on. We didn't do that for the sample. It worked out fine. But that's just something, if it ends up being too much of a handful for you, don't ever worry about, maybe you want to do some basting stitches and just get kind of less to deal with all at one time. But like I said, if I have an area that has a lot of bulk, I just pin more often. And that way I don't worry that it's going to slip or move, because that's a lot to keep track of. So of course you're just going to pin all the way around. Now pin all the way around. In fact, let me show you. We did that. Let me show you this one. We left a 10-inch opening. I've got a pin left over there. We left a 10-inch opening, and I'll show you why. Now, once you leave that opening, you're just going to sew 1/4 inch of a seam all the way around, taking the pins out as you go. Let me show you a really cool way to finish the binding. Now, if you already have your preferred method of binding, then your oven mitt's ready to go. But maybe you don't have a preferred method of binding. Let me show that to you now. So in that gap, I'm just going to put a pin about midway. I haven't measured that. It's just a guess. About midway. Remember how we cut the binding strips to 2.5 inches. There's something significant about that measurement. Let's get our little ruler out and our friction pen. If you've cut your binding strips to 2.5 inches, then you will measure 2.5 inches over. Let's say you like 2.25 inch binding strips. I don't recommend it for this project, by the way. If you're used to binding with 2.25 inch strips, there's too much bulk down here. There's too much real estate you have to go over with this binding, that you probably do want a bit of a thicker, a wider binding strip. 2.5, I would say, would be your minimum. So we did that today, 2.5. Measure over 2.5 inches, and we're just going to make a mark. In fact, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and cut that right there. Okay, then I'm going to lay the other binding strip over, and where it is at that pin, of course, that's right, that distance from here to here was 2.5. I'm just going to mark that line real quick, and let me go ahead and cut that. This is a really cool way to finish binding, not just on this oven mitt, but quilts too. All right, so now this is an important step. This step can be confusing, so you're going to want to definitely have an overhead shot of this and watch how it happens. So we have a left binding and a right binding strip. For now, just deal with the right one, and everything's going to move away from me. So I'm going to open that, and then you're going to grab it and open it again. Okay, I want you to watch that one more time, because it definitely confused me. All of us here when we were trying to figure out how to do this really cool binding. Open away from yourself, grab, open again. So now with the left, it's much simpler. You'll just open. So again, open away, and you'll place that so it's 90 degrees on top of the other binding strip. I'll put that over there so it's not so much pressure on that binding strip. Okay, then you'll take your ruler and your friction pen, and you'll just go ahead and mark that diagonal line. So I want you to see what I'm marking here. Where that binding strip ended, right in that corner, there's a line from here to here. Now pin that. Definitely pin that on both sides. And I'll take that to my sewing machine. and I'm just going to do a straight stitch. It's a little bit of a maneuver to get everything situated and out of the way, but you just make it work. Okay, we'll remove our pins. And then, of course, because of that bulk, you'll just want to go ahead with your maybe your rotary cutter, trim that away, and you know, give that a good press. I like to press my seams open whenever I do a splice like that. It just helps them lie a little bit flatter. So let's go ahead and press that open, and then you'll fold that in half. Okay, so of course now you take this to a sewing machine, and that section that was not secured to the oven mitt itself, you'll just sew that along there. Once that's done, then you're going to go ahead. I'm going to show you some really fun products today. I found these, they're called Wonder Clips. I love these. I used to bind, and of course pins, I always pinned. I mean, I probably, you know, turned it around to the back, and I got my pins, and then I'd pin the whole thing, and then as I was sewing it down by hand, I'd always poke myself. I love these Wonder Clips, and they support breast cancer, so that's awesome too, that I'm getting something useful, and there's a beneficiary on the other end of that. So look how these just work. They're wonderful, and then you're not going to be stabbing yourself anymore. So, and the box I think has 50 in it, so you can probably get around most of this without having to, you can probably clip the whole thing. Now, what I like to do is I like to sew things down by hand, because when I do machine binding, I find that I often either miss the back, it doesn't look as polished, and you know, this is going to be displayed on my stove, so I want it to look really nice. We went ahead and did the machine here because on the back side you couldn't see it, but we will be seeing the back side in this case, so I do recommend to go ahead and sew that down by hand. Now I like to use a coordinating thread, of course, and I coordinate the thread with whatever the binding color is. Not the background fabric, but the binding. Now I've went ahead and threaded a needle, and I just want to show you how I like to do binding in case you've never done this before. So I've tied a knot. It's a single strand of the thread. I like to go in underneath the binding and anchor my knot there so it's hidden. I don't want a knot showing. Then I kind of just bring that back. Now I'm going to do this so you can see it. I'm going to come in. I'm not ever going to the front. I'm going to stay on the back side of this project the entire time. I'm just going to come in, and I'm getting a little bit of the meat of the batting. I can feel it in the needle. And I'm going to rock my needle back and pick up just a little bit of the edge of that binding. Then I'm going to come back down. Notice I never come vertical. I'm always coming at an angle, picking up the backing and some of the batting, running the needle underneath. I don't know, I tend to take longer stitches because I'm always anxious to get my binding done. I know I should probably take shorter stitches, maybe 1/8 of an inch. You could certainly do that. And I'm just going to pick that up again. And we'll do a couple more stitches, and you'll just continue this way all the way around. Now I'm using a Superior Threads today thread because I love the quality of Superior Threads. It's 100% cotton. There's 75 gorgeous colors, endorsed by Alex Anderson, godmother of quilting. I mean, Alex Anderson knows, you know, the fact that she endorses the product is good enough for me, and I've used Masterpiece so much. I love it. We have these color cards. There's 75 gorgeous colors. This is live thread. So that's nice to have in your sewing room when you're trying to coordinate, you know, trying to match a color and know what thread you need to be ordering. So that's all there is. You'll just continue to bind all the way around your project, and you're complete. So thank you for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.